And Tim, would you be our doorkeeper and let everybody in who is waiting on the doorway? Hi, everybody. It's a great pleasure to have who I consider one of the most important Korean American conductors on the scene today. Dr. Travis J. Cross is director of bands at UCLA, and also he has guest conducted pretty much, I think, every band that you can think of across not only the United States, but Singapore and East Asia and all of that. And he's been a great proponent of music education. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation today with him. I would really encourage you to take part and ask him questions. You can maybe in the chat put in what your major instrument is so that he can see who you are. And of course, if you can have your videos on, if you're not having a meal right now, do have it on so that he has somebody to look at. So Dr. Cross, we sort of talked a little bit before the meeting started, and I gave you sort of what's been happening at Cornell. One of the big challenges in this pandemic is how many conductors in different institutions have responded to the pandemic, because of course, in the fall, many institutions, including ours, weren't allowing wind players to play inside at all. So we had a sort of basically a virtual learning environment. And I've had to just completely change my syllabus entirely. And in fact, I ended up teaching a social justice course. How have you responded to the pandemic at UCLA with your students?
I also taught a social justice course. So we, California is pretty like New York, pretty what's the right word? Proactive, when it comes to protection and safety. And Los Angeles County, of course, being so large, had all these rules and regulations. So we also were not allowed to come back and play. And we still aren't back playing yet. So you're a little bit ahead of us in terms of being able to come back in person. We're counting on that for the fall. Plan is that we'll be able to come back and do some chamber music, spaced out chamber music. And hopefully by then there'll be enough people vaccinated that we can kind of get back to what we might call normal life. But so we're on quarters, fall quarter, winter quarter, spring quarter. And when we shut down last winter, it was maybe the 9th week out of 10 in winter quarter. We were almost done with the quarter. We lost a couple concerts at the end of the cycle. In fact, I had a dress rehearsal Monday for a concert Tuesday night. We were gonna have a concert Tuesday night, 12 noon on Tuesday. March 9th was when I had an emergency meeting where we found out that we were going remote. And actually, in hindsight, we had the option. We weren't going to go remote until Wednesday morning. So we could have legally done the concert Tuesday night. But at this point, people were starting to get worried. There were concerns, we were on the West Coast. And I didn't think anyone wanted to play a band concert under those circumstances. And it was going to be a great concert too. We're going to, Kevin Putt's Millennium Cannons was the opener. We were closing with Pines of Rome, a really wonderful Japanese transcription of Pines of Rome. And Quiet City with our oboe teacher and trumpet teacher. Actually, I'm sorry, a brief tangent. I called the concert A Tale of Three Cities. It opened with Millennium Cannons, and then Quiet City, and then a piece by Paul Hinson, Matthew Hinson and Paul Mack, called Requiem for a City, which was commissioned by the Sydney Conservatorium about Sydney, and then Pines of Rome. So I'm like, I got Quiet City, Requiem for a City, Pines of Rome. So now I miss that concert again. But so we for spring quarter, we continued in wind ensemble, orchestra, choirs. We continued in our separate classes, and we did various forms of stuff. The choirs did some virtual choirs. They did a couple of things where they learned parts kind of over Zoom, and then they recorded, put them together into a performance. What our orchestra and wind ensemble did was we basically pivoted to guest artists, talks, projects. I think I designed something like 5 projects for string quarter, and the students had to do 3 of them. They could do some sort of a social media engagement project where they would offer lessons or instruction to high school students. They could do um, an interview that they would record and then post. They could perform some sort of virtual video sort of thing. And we brought in guest speakers. I brought in some musical theater friends of mine. I brought in some composers, and we did those sorts of things. What we found at the end of that quarter, as we realized this was not just going to go away, and that we were going to have to be in this situation going forward, was our students, because they're almost all music majors and they're mostly music performance majors, they were getting plenty of time with their instruments in their lessons, in their chamber music. They were still doing like string quartets virtually, and they were kind of recorded out. A couple of our studios, the teachers make them record something and send it in, even in normal times, like send it in halfway through the week before their lesson. So they were just like, when we were giving them additional projects, they're like, it's just too much, with my classes on Zoom and all my other stuff. So over the summer, the other conductors and I got together and basically said, if we don't have band, choir, and orchestra, they're still going to be singing, they're still going to be playing, they're still going to be developing. We're not in a position to do any realistic ensemble skills. I mean, virtual performances are cool and all, and they were nice, especially early in the pandemic, to send the message, we're still here, we're still making music. But as all of you know, the skills that you develop in an orchestra, listening to others, reacting to others, compromising, adjusting, finding some sort of common understanding, that goes away when you're recording to a click track by yourself. So like the musical value of an ensemble was kind of gone too. So then we thought, what is it that we've always wanted to do and never had time? We're always getting ready. We're always busy getting ready for the next concert. We have so many performance pressures. It's got to sound really good. High school band, we got to get a Division I rating. We got to win the contest. There's all this performance pressure. So, I mean, I can't imagine a time when you would just say, hey, we're going to take 3 rehearsals off. We got a concert coming up, but we're going to take some rehearsals off, and we're going to talk about musician health. We're going to take some rehearsals off. We're going to talk about entrepreneurship. We're going to take some rehearsals off. We're going to talk about how to build a website. We just never do it. So we said we don't have rehearsals. So maybe this is our chance to do all those other things. And so we designed a series of 8 or 9 what we called special topics and ensemble music courses that any music major could take. So if you were a singer, you didn't have to take something with the choir director. If you were a violin player, you didn't have to take something with the orchestra teacher. They could mix and match. And we tried in this set of 8 or 9 classes to have a mix of 2 or 3 that would be fairly performance heavy. So the students that did want to do more recording, did want to do more playing, would still have that option. But most of them were not performance based at all, because they were already doing that in chamber music and large ensemble. So some of the classes we had a class called Social Justice Issues in Classical Music. I taught a class called the Social Musician, the Entrepreneurial Musician on Social Media. So we talked about how to build up your presence on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and what to do, what not to do. Our choral director taught a class on the American choral tradition. He taught a class on Brahms. Our orchestra director taught a class on diversity in audition lists. Their whole project for the quarter was like looking at what makes an orchestral audition excerpt list, and then trying to find other things that could be added as well, so that those could be diversified. And I think they connected with the American Symphony Orchestra League people, and the idea was, what can we do and take this further? One of our jazz guys taught a class called Improvisation for Classical Musicians, which is a class I wish we could teach every student every year. But it was just 90 minutes once a week. They would come in and get coached by this Grammy-winning jazz instructor on techniques, not for jazz improvisation, but for creativity, for exploring that sort of thing. And then the one that I really enjoyed, our choir director, orchestra director, and I together team taught a course called The Art of Programming, where each one of us presented one class on sort of how we approach programming, but then students had a lot of projects where they put programs together. One of the projects, they had to do a 3-minute pre-concert talk as though they were doing it. And so what was so cool about that, well, it was fun for me to teach with my colleagues and for us to see like where we're like-minded and where our disciplines are different. But it was just so cool for me to have choir students and string students that I was working with, and for our students to have a chance to be with students they might not be with in the ensembles and have that experience. This quarter, it's our last quarter doing this, spring quarter. It's been a long year. A lot of people took the social justice and social media classes over fall and winter quarters, but this year I decided to change it up, and I'm doing one called Build a Better Website, where the students are working on kind of how they would develop a musician website. And also I'm teaching one called the Broadway Musical, because it's been a long year and I deserve a cookie. And so, you know, I'm just teaching on an area that I'm not really a professional expert at, but I'm a pretty active consumer. And
I've also heard in one of your talks that your dream is to one day have a show choir under your wings. So,
well, so no, my goal, I was asked at a conducting workshop, maybe my second year teaching high school, where I saw myself going with my career. And I said, I've learned never to answer that question, because 2 years ago, my career goal was to be the marching band and show choir director at the high school I graduated from. Fun fact, I graduated from a high school in Ankeny, Iowa, suburb of Des Moines, bedroom community. And I was in the show choir the first year we started competing. I was a sophomore, the first year that Visual Adrenaline went out on the composition circuit. We like chose the name. And about 5 or 6 years after I graduated, that show choir actually won a national championship. And I remember hearing an interview on NPR with Ryan Murphy, who was the guy who conceived Glee. And the bad guy show choir in Glee is called Vocal Adrenaline. And he talked about when they were doing research for the show, he's like, there's YouTube videos all over the place. There's all these high school show choirs who have these YouTube videos. And I am 100% sure that Vocal Adrenaline in Glee is named after the show choir that I graduated from, that later became a national champion, called Visual Adrenaline, which we actually stole from a Christian a cappella group called Audio Adrenaline when we named the group. But that's my Glee connection. I'm pretty sure they got some inspiration from my high school show choir. There's still time. Dreams never die.
So I mean, that's really inspiring, and I really admire how many conductors have sort of switched gears to try to provide a rich experience for their students. I wonder if we could sort of shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about what it means for you, because in many ways I've kind of went through many of the same places you did. Like Northwestern was where I did my undergrad, and I go out and I actually played in NUM, an oboist playing trombone, learned to do correct rights with John Painter. I mean, those days I really treasure. And then after my NUM days, I taught for 2 years in the Quincy Public School. So I lived in the Midwest for over a decade. And so, but one of the things that I found myself a couple weeks ago, you were hosting a sort of a Zoom session with many young band directors and music educators, many of whom are your students and your mentees. And I think when I was growing up, I would look around other band directors, other orchestra directors, and I didn't really see myself in them. As a young Korean American, I was sort of the odd one out. I would go to conducting workshops and I would be the only Korean person. I would go to Midwest and there'd be a few of us, but I would look towards my mentor figures, and it was difficult to see, difficult not to see somebody that looked like me. So could you talk a little bit about what the field looks like today? Because the Zoom session I attended, there was a time when that we were sharing, and I was really moved by what the young music educators were saying about the pioneers who went through the field. There were a few directors who had been fighting the fight for a longer time than both of us. But could you share a little bit about the current music education field and how it is represented?
Well, no, I can share a lot about this. This is something that I'm really passionate about, and also that is very, very textured and layered. There's a lot of intersectionality at work here. One interesting thing is there's a lot of Asians in American bands and orchestras, and there are a lot fewer standing in front of them. And part of that, I'm sure, is connected to cultural expectations in Asian families. I'm adopted, so I didn't grow up in an Asian family, but I have many, many friends who have. I mean, I know about the 2 fingers for the rice and the, taking your shoes off and all that stuff. But there's a certain expectation, doctor, lawyer kind of thing, and you can do it for a while, but you can't do it for a career. So you play, but then you don't conduct. That's a thing. Certainly, there's a lot of work that Asian cultures themselves have to do in terms of gender equity, especially when it comes to making it possible or permissible for women to take leadership roles, that there's a whole ton of baggage there that we have to work through. I think that seeing someone who looks like you do what you want to do is not a requirement, but I think it helps. I think it makes a difference. I think it's positive. My primary teacher in graduate school is a white woman. I am neither white nor a woman. And almost all my other teachers before that have been white men. One of the things we did in that session with all the Asian band and orchestra directors, well, the first one we did was we actually had a survey. And one of the questions on the survey was, how old were you when you first played for an Asian conductor? Which is kind of a variation of a question that was going around Twitter last summer, which is, how old were you the first time you had a Black male teacher? And for many people, it was never. Some people, it was college. Especially that intersectionality, Black male in teaching. And so those role models are important, and that representation is important. And if you don't see a lot of people who look like you, it's not like you say, I can't do it, but there's just a little subliminal piece that sort of might discourage you from doing it. And I think it is good to have mentors and role models. I remember very clearly, I can share this. There's nothing confidential about this. I was back at Northwestern for, it was for a weekend, probably to see some shows or something in Chicago. And I went to a graduate wind conducting recital. This is my studio. These are the people behind me in the lineage. I went, and it was a young conductor named Roderick Cox. Roderick, whose career in the last 5 years has exploded as an orchestral conductor. But Roderick did his master's degree in wind conducting with Mallory. And present in the audience at that recital was a former Northwestern conducting graduate student who is currently at the time teaching at the University of Michigan. Now, Ann Arbor, Chicago, not that far apart. And this person had, before he went to Michigan, had taught at DePaul. So he had Chicago connections. It was probably a nice weekend back for him. But he was also African-American, and he was, I think, there to support this younger figure in his field. And I know that community in music education has done a really good job of providing that sort of mentorship, that sort of support. Alfred Watkins, high school band director at Lassiter High School, has been very, very active in sort of reaching out to younger Black band directors and mentoring, giving advice, making connections, networking, because that's important, because there's a value to that. And so now that I'm in a place where I'm in a job I'm probably going to retire in, I don't have to get tenure or get promoted or anything. I feel like it's important for me to try to provide more of those opportunities, to create those opportunities within my sub community. So to actually answer your question, there are relatively few Asian conductors in the United States. Most of them are either choral or orchestral. There's a handful of really pretty well-known choral conductors of Asian descent, and there are a handful of world-renowned Asian conductors, largely trained in Asia and flying around, but a few of American background. But there haven't been that many in the band field, and we have some real pioneers in California and some real pioneers in Hawaii, because that's where a lot of Asian people lived. But I find that when I conduct an all-state or a region band or a district band and they list all of the former conductors, almost always I'm the first Asian person who's ever conducted that group. Many times I'm the first non-white person who's ever conducted the group. I'm conducting an all-state band in a couple of years, and they have 70 some years of history of conductors, and I will literally be the first non-white person ever to conduct that. So there aren't a lot of us, and consequently, we're able to, I think, form a pretty close-knit community. I would always, at the Midwest Clinic at CBNA, we always take pictures, and we call it the Asian Bandmasters Association. And it's 3 of us or 5 of us or 7 of us. When I first hosted this big event that was Asian American college band directors, a couple military people. We had one orchestra interloper, Suhan, from Baldwin Wallace, who is just very close to the band world. But there were 17 of us, and I don't think I missed anyone who's like primarily a band person. I missed, I think, a few people who do band and orchestra together, but that's a fairly small number total at that particular level of work. But there are a lot of young people, and as I see the young people, as some of them will come to my conducting workshop. I'll run into them at conferences here and there. We started hosting a dinner at the Midwest Clinic 2 years ago. I see a lot of energy there, and I see a lot of people doing really good work there. And they're not doing good work because they're Asian, but I want them to be able to see the people and know the people. And that's the other benefit. We're small enough. They can get to know them. We haven't done an event with Seiji Ozawa and AGOA and, Kent Nagano and like all the people that are kind of the world famous people. But besides those people, every single person who looks a little bit like them is a phone call or a Zoom or, a DM away. And I think the more that those younger people are aware of that, the more resources they'll have, the more role models they'll have, and ultimately the more successful they'll be. I'm also excited. One of my doctoral students is a Korean American woman, and I didn't take her because of that. But she and there's another Korean American same year who's finishing his DMA at another school. It's exciting to watch them and to see what they're going to go on and do as well.
Yeah, what was really inspiring in that last sort of Zoom session with all those younger music educators was that I had to profess to myself, like, wow, how lucky these young musicians are to have this network of not only colleagues who are teaching with them, but to have mentors like you and older pioneers who are now in the field. I mean, I'm a little bit dating myself, but when I started teaching at Quincy, Illinois as a young band director, I played in this sort of community band, which is made up of all of the sort of Central Illinois music educator. I mean, every single person in this sort of 60-member band was a band director of from somewhere within an hour-and-a-half driving range. And I was literally the only Asian person. So to have this network that really moved me, and I was really happy for them. But I still sense that this weight of, as I have personally experienced with my father basically saying, no, you got to do something respectable. And in that way, they really try to talk me out of going into music. And one of the things I'm always facing when I meet a prospective student who applies to Cornell is that I kind of know that unless this person is really special, like most of the students who are playing in the Cornell Orchestra, most of the students who are submitting musical supplements to Cornell and then asking to sit down with me and talk to me have no intention of playing and touching their instrument once they're in college, because they have been sort of in this mindset of now it's time to become serious about your studies, and it's time to put away your toys and your violins and your oboes. And I fear what that is doing to that mindset of how they think about arts and music. And as somebody who's been teaching for a long time, I've always tried to find ways to make sure that, because most of my students are non-music majors, 99%. I'll have Tim, who's a music major, but he'll be a double major. And there's a sense that there's this longing to be part of the musical culture, to be part of maybe even the profession, but somehow they don't sense they have the permission to do so, or they don't themselves give themselves permission. What would you say to a young high school student, Cornellian, who is sort of struggling with this issue of music or not?
Well, yeah, I mean, so I'm going to kind of zoom out real quick with the philosophical thing. Bruce Adolphe, who's a composer, Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center, for many, many years, has also written a couple of books, some really lovely books, poems, essays, and he wrote an exercises. His first book is called The Mind's Ear, which is this book of great kind of imagination exercises. Second book is a book of poems called What to Listen For in the World, which is kind of a play on Aaron Copland's title, but it's poems about art and music. It's a lovely book that was introduced to me by, I think, Bob Reynolds, at a conducting workshop. But then he wrote a book of little short essays called Of Mozart, Parrots, and Cherry Blossoms in the Wind, which I read, I think, when I was a young high school band director. It's a great little book. It's an afternoon read, but the last chapter is called Warning: The Side Effects of Music Education. And he talks about how our society is obsessed with side effects. That, there's this research that one glass of red wine helps you study better. 2 glasses of red wine doesn't help you study better. He makes the joke that no research has yet been done on 3 glasses. But that, that garlic is useful as antioxidants to warding off this disease, that that in essence, and this was written 25 years ago, but that America is obsessed with side effects. And he talks about the side effects of music, which are better test scores, higher grades, better college admissions, stay out of trouble, stay in school, stay out of jail, all these kinds of social things that we talk, and when our programs are threatened, when they're going to cut the 5th grade band program, or when they're going to defund the band, or they're going to take money out of the whatever project, a lot of times we say, well, look at their grades, look at what this does for them. Music makes them smarter. In Texas, the Texas Music Educators Association a few years ago started actually posting the average SAT scores of the members of the all-state band and orchestra. And And I'm not against this. You know, a lot of people are driven by extrinsic means, extrinsic motivations. And if some 10th grader who's trying to decide whether or not to stay in orchestra or not sees that the average SAT score of someone in the top Texas All-State is 1550 or something, I'm on the old 1600 scale, but you know, is whatever. And that keeps them in orchestra. Mazel tov. I say do it. You know, I'm glad that anything that works works. Most of those students were probably smart even before they joined band and orchestra. And also a lot of those students are probably financially advantaged too. We could peel back all those layers of the onion, which are significant and important. So let's not give ourselves too much credit there. We just picked the smart kids, gave them violins, and then said we made them smarter. But I do believe we actually do make them smarter. But what Bruce Adolphe says is, if we discovered the red wine had no positive effect on your heart, would we stop drinking it? You know, we're not doing it for the side effect. We're doing it for the prime effect, which is that there's essential experience. I don't drink wine, but there's essential experience to that. It matches a meal. It brings out the flavors. You know, we do it not because of the side effect. It's good for my heart. Oh, my cholesterol's high. My doctor prescribes that I drink a glass of wine. That, you know, we're not doing it for the side effect. We're doing it for the prime effect, which is the sensual life experience. Similarly, the way that I talk about this, and every time I'm in front of an audience, remember what that was like. Every time I'm in front of an audience, I talk about this. I say music makes them smarter. I'm happy to hold the sign. I'm happy to write the letter to the legislator. I'm happy to write to the school board and say that music makes them smarter. Their grades are higher. They get into college. But what I'm more interested in is that music makes them better. Is that the prime effect of music? The side effect of music is it helps organize your mind. The side effect of music is you learn to solve complex rhythmic problems. The side effect of music is you get along with other people. But the prime effect of music is you express humanity. You embrace vulnerability. You understand that beauty and pain and love and all the complexities of life are something that it's okay to share with other people, and to receive from other people. And you know, there's not a number that goes with that. It's hard to objectively quantify, and that's a redundancy there, to quantify, but that is why we do it. If your grade didn't go up one bit because you listen to Mahler 2, well, nobody goes in to listen to Mahler 2 thinking, I think this is going to help me in math. They go to listen to Mahler 2 because it is transformative, emotional, spiritual, human experience. And so that's all the philosophical underpinning for what I'm about to say, which is making music makes you better. And whether you are going to be a doctor, if you're going to be a brain surgeon, listen, do you want a brain surgeon to operate on you who only studied and only read books? Or do you want someone who understands what loss is like and what pain is like and how to talk to people about it and how to communicate and how to, not that you don't learn how to struggle, not that you don't learn human skills outside of music. Music is not the only place you get this, but music is one of the best places you get this. And who do I want to have work with me on a team? You know, the ability to say, I know what 440 is, and you're not playing it, but I want to be with you and make it work. So I'm going to bend a little bit in order for us to be successful together. That's a skill I want on the person in my MBA team. That's a skill I want in the person who is doing surgery with me. That's a skill I want on the person who's on my legal team. You know, those are, we're getting back into side effects, but also these are things that sort of make us all better at what we do. And when it comes time to find a partner, when it comes time to elect leaders, when it comes time to build a community, I think you want people that are not only experiencing that and versed in it, but that are comfortable with it, that cherish it, that celebrate it, that embrace that essential, fundamental part of our humanity, which music speaks to.
I mean, that was so eloquently put, and it reflects so many of my, in all my teaching. I always try to figure out a way, how can I make what I have to say about this musical phrase apply to this junior computer science major, where they'll say, yeah, I can use that. And so I'm always telling them, okay, this is a life lesson, and use that, whether it be listening to each other, whether it be whatever. Yeah.
What we do in rehearsal is complex problem solving in real time, collaboratively, based on several different stimuli and inputs and pieces of information. I mean, it is a microcosm for any team-oriented, complex work situation that you'll find yourself in later in life.
Yeah, just non-verbal cues that we go through in an orchestra or a band, figuring out how to negotiate when we're off a little bit because of the way the sound is reflecting. How do we get back into in sync without stopping and talking about it?
And that involves give and take.
Yeah,
it involves sometimes being together is more important than being right. And there are times in our lives when nothing is more important than being right. I would much rather be right than racist, even if everyone else is racist. But I really think I make the joke whenever I do high school honor bands that like this band didn't exist 3 days ago. These students all came in with different experiences, different skills. Some of them knew each other probably, but they had to get in a room together and make it work. They couldn't all be first chair. They couldn't all have the same roles. They had to figure out how to work together as a group. And I say, if we could only get a stage big enough to have the United States House of Representatives in an honor band, the country would work a lot better. They would figure out how to make it work. And it always gets a laugh and applause. And it's true. I mean, imagine if half the members of Congress had been in band and orchestra and remembered what that was like. Half of them probably were in football at least, and basketball. I mean, they understand those sorts of team skills, but that's a different dynamic. Teamwork when you're trying to win and teamwork when you're trying to defeat someone else is a different group dynamic when it's teamwork in the furtherance of beauty, where not only can everybody win, but the only way everybody wins is if nobody loses. It's just, and I'm sure someone should do a study. Someone should do it for a senior thesis project at Cornell University. Someone should go research what percentage of members of the United States House of Representatives, played music and when they quit, how long they did it. But I tell you, I think the more of them that do it, the better the world would be.
Absolutely. Amen. Yeah. I'm going to open it up to our students because, they hear plenty from me all the time, and they also complain that they hear too much from me. So I'm going to open it up to the floor. Use the raise your hand feature or just chime in with a question. So while we're waiting, I'll ask one last question. So in one of your talks, I'm going to send links to everybody. You're a Yamaha teaching artist, and there's a page where it has I think it's like 10 or 9 different short sort of answers. But one of those, you talked about balance versus balancing.
Yeah.
And I would love for you to talk about that, because that is such a great way to put things about how we face tremendous amounts of work and how to survive and negotiate the kind of things that all of our students are going through right now during prelim period, but also early in their career. So I would love for you to talk about that.
Happy to. So a lot of this idea owes to Michael Haythcock, director of bands at the University of Michigan, and actually to Jerry Schweibert, who's a movement and acting teacher and movement person who's done some work with conductors, much like Bud Byer did when I was in Northwestern, who was a mime and talked a lot about nonverbal communication. Cornell college students, Cornell University students may be clutch their pearls at what I'm about to say. Being busy is not a virtue. Simply being busy doesn't make you better. It is not the goal to be busy. Oh, look how busy I am. I'm so important. But being busy is also not a bad thing, because oftentimes if you're busy, it's because you've shown that you're able to do a lot of things and people are asking you to do more things. So it's not the goal. The goal is not to be busy, but the goal is to learn how to be busy and how to manage it and how to still lead a meaningful, tolerable, but joyful life. And I think the key to that is understanding that there is an ebb and a flow to stress and to busyness. If you are busy all the time, it is unsustainable. Nobody can handle it. You will hurt yourself or get yourself sick or hurt others or do a bad job enough times that then you won't get asked to do other things and you won't be busy. So I want to do more things. I have more activities. I need to get into law school. I got to add this. I got to beef up my resume. Sometimes that's counterproductive. If you're never busy, you probably have no ambition. You're not accomplishing anything. So the key is to figure out, when am I going to be busy, and learn how to cope with that, and then make sure that there's enough downtime in between when you don't have to be that busy all the time. And that's where the idea of balance versus balancing comes into place. Balance is a noun or an adjective. It's a state that you achieve. Balance is static. Once I get this degree, once I get this grade, once I get this job, once I get this much money, then I'll be happy, because I will have reached the point where I can be balanced, static. It's an illusion. There's no such thing as balanced. What there is balancing, which is a continuing act of moving back and forth and adjusting. Even if you look at someone who is standing on a balance beam, there's a great example. Someone who's standing on a balance beam, they are not standing still. They have not gotten there into the right place and then locked every muscle and staying in one place. What they're doing is they are constantly moving and shifting very quickly. They're letting their weight go this way. Their arms are going this way to counterbalance. They're doing a lot of little things to create the illusion of balance. But the actual act of looking like you're balanced is a dynamic, not a static, a dynamic act of balancing. And so that means the way I remember talking about this once. I was at a conducting workshop and there were some young teachers there, and I was a grad student, so I wasn't that much older than they were, but there were these first, second year teachers saying, "Oh, I don't have any time for my personal life. I'm at school all the time. This is just, I can't live like this." And I just said, "Listen, you're a first or second year band director. That's how it's supposed to be. You don't know how to do anything yet. You're building your system. You're getting your stuff in place. You're supposed to be at school 15 hours a day when you're a first or second year teacher. You're not doing it wrong. That's just what it takes to learn how to do it. If you're doing that all year long, that's a problem. And if you're doing that for 10 years, that's a problem. But certain times you're going to be busy. Finals week. There's nobody at finals week or the week before finals week who's like, "Yeah, I'm just going to take some time and have a nap and walk around." That is an unreasonable expectation for life. You're going to be busy at certain times, but what then you have to do is find the time a couple weeks before that, a couple weeks after that, get the downtime, the relaxation, the reflection, the recovery, so that you can go in that shape. And then once you've done that enough times, and this is where being busy in college really helps you in life. Once you've done that enough times, you realize that it's survivable. You realize that busyness is not a terminal state. You realize that I'm here. I know what this feels like. It is not pleasant. and it is temporary, and I will come through on the other side. So when I have deadlines, which I have all the time, for memos and letters and things I have to write, it's like, you know, tomorrow I have to do a couple big projects. It's not going to be fun. And I know that, but I also know that I will get through it. I will get it done. And then Friday will not be Thursday anymore. So that's what this act of balancing and the act of having the stress and the busyness gives us the opportunity to learn, so that then when it comes to us again in life, as it will continually, we're like, okay, I recognize this. I know what this is going to feel like. I know I'm going to get through it. And that's where I think that idea of balance as a static achievement is an illusion. It's a lie. Balancing as a constant act of juggling and adjusting and changing and being a little too busy and a little less busy is how people function who are successful.
Okay, questions from students?
It's the 15 seconds of silence. There we go.
I'll go first.
Go ahead.
Well, I know from as a wind player, I've played in orchestra in high school, right? But I also played in band in high school, so I was kind of familiar with both sides, because there's a different feel between working in a band and working in orchestra, sort of, because just the nature of the music too. But I know there are some string players that, like, for example, in high school, and I think even at Cornell occasionally, they just were completely unfamiliar with the experience of working with wind players, and vice versa too. Some wind players had never played an orchestra before. So what advice would you give to, to your point of working together and making this collaborative environment? What would you say to a student or a person who would watch this down the line and has no idea what it's like to work with someone who plays a completely different type of instrument?
Well, so first, real quickly, what would you say, Tim, are the biggest cultural differences between the two kinds of organizations, having been in both?
That's interesting. I kind of feel like the context in which they play, at least, because like band, you have the traditional connotation of like marching band, or you're playing, like 4th of July parade or something. Whereas when someone says orchestra, the people, like people I've talked to, they think, oh, you're in a concert hall, you're dressed up nicely. Just in terms of who you're playing to also. Yeah, that's like one of the ones that just comes to mind, at least for me, in terms of who you play to and where you're playing.
Well, and I think that culture, so even though a wind ensemble, wind orchestra is it's like an orchestra without strings, right? I mean, it aspires to be highly artistic and, an indoor, not athletic, not military activity. We still have that in our DNA. We have that in our culture. You could say that band people are a little more jocks in that regard. We just have a little bit more of a kind of a little competitive in a way, like competitive team, because we've all been in competitions where we want our band to win or whatever. That's part of our culture in a way that it isn't as often in orchestra. I think another actually interesting cultural difference is the repertoire. A lot of orchestral conductors, and all the best ones, but a lot of orchestral conductors do new music. They do contemporary music by living composers. But the fact is, the symphony orchestra has 400 or 500 years of really, really good music to draw from, mostly written by dead white European men, but 400 or 500 years of really great art. Whereas the wind ensemble is only about 100 years old. The wind ensemble is 50 years old, 60 years old, 70 years old. The band medium is maybe 150 years old. So we don't have as much repertoire. So we're looking for more new repertoire. And I think that's also a cultural difference. Whereas an orchestra can be pretty successful, especially commercially, by playing all music written in the 18th and 19th centuries. And bands, we don't have music from then so much. We have a little bit. So we have to be much more looking for new stuff. And that has pros and cons. We play a lot of garbage. We play a lot of bad music because it's music that was written for orchestra in 1750, but it got played once and then forgotten. Whereas we're the one person who's playing it in 2020 or 2021. But we also have this energy. We talk to composers. We have composers in our rehearsals. We support composers. We are part of the process of giving composers opportunities to learn and grow and fostering them as musicians. So that's another kind of cultural difference that I think makes bands really exciting is I think of the wind ensemble essentially as a new music ensemble, a new music medium. And I think there's an openness because we are so, I think sometimes when an orchestra sees a piece by a new composer, they roll their eyes and sigh and wish that they were playing Mozart, Brahms, and Bruckner instead. Whereas when band players see a piece by a new composer, they're like, "Ooh, what's in here? What am I going? I'm going to be challenged with? What am I going to learn from it? How am I going to be able to contribute to this piece of music?" That's not answering your question, but that's just another little cultural thing. To your question, I think the biggest, not the biggest, I think one interesting difference between wind players and string players in an orchestra is that the wind players are almost always soloists and the string players are almost always section players. And many times a wind player prefers to play an orchestra, not even because the music is better or because it's more prestigious, but because they're more important every time they play. If you play clarinet in a wind ensemble, you might be one of 6 or 9, or if you're in a big symphonic band, 18 or 20, much like a violinist in a section orchestra. Whereas if you're a clarinetist in a symphony orchestra, there's 2, maybe 3 of you. Every single note you play is a solo. And that's a different kind of engagement. Now, I tell my students that I think it's good for them to play in both band and orchestra because you're going to build different skills. I kind of compare it to marathon running, medium distance running, and then sprinting. Being an orchestral trumpet player is like being a sprinter. I bet Mahler 2 is what, 85, 90 minutes long. And I bet even the principal trumpet player has, out of those 90 minutes, doesn't have the horn in their face, but 10 minutes max in the whole piece. So it's a lot of sitting there counting rests and listening to beautiful music around you. But they sit there for 5 minutes and then they pick up that horn and they have to be instantly brilliant. And then it's like sprinting. Whereas when you're in a wind ensemble, piece might be 10 minutes long, but you might be playing the trumpet for 6 of those 10 minutes. And you're running like the 1600 or something. You're learning to use the same basic athleticism, the same basic skills, but you have to deploy it in a different way. And then when you're in a brass quintet, where you do a 1-hour concert and you're playing probably 58 minutes out of that 1 hour, that's like running a marathon. Or you're playing a Broadway show. I had this experience, it wasn't the last time I saw Miss Saigon, but when Miss Saigon was in San Francisco, this most recent tour, the music director was a former NUM drum major, and the pianist did his undergrad at Northwestern, master's at Juilliard. And I went up to see the show in San Francisco. I saw it a couple times and I sat in the pit once, right on the shoulder of the pianist. And it was just amazing what he was doing. A fantastic musician. But behind me was the trombonist. And so this is a 2-hour, 40-minute musical. And let's acknowledge that it's problematic. There are things about Miss Saigon, especially for Asian Americans, that are problematic. And I recognize and acknowledge that. It's also a piece that in my life has been very important and actually quite empowering in some ways as well. So it's something I've seen many, many times. I know that score really well. So on Broadway, original London orchestra, probably 25 players, big, even in 1990. The last production on Broadway, probably 15 players. Everything gets, and then when they go on the road, probably 12 or 13 players. So this trombone player is not only playing the trombone parts from the original orchestration, but is also playing some cello parts and some piano left-hand parts and filling out chords. So this player in this 2-hour, 40-minute musical is probably playing the trombone for at least 90 minutes. Or more, and I thought during the second act, every time he stopped playing, I heard just as a physical survival mechanism. Not like in that moment, I'm like, Every student should have to play in a pit orchestra like this so that they learn how to use their body in a different way than they do when they're playing Mahler or Beethoven than when they're playing Lincolnshire Posy in Wind Ensemble or John Mackey or Stephen Bryant. You know, it's just there are so many different ways of approaching the same instrument. And I think that how you play in band and how you play in orchestra is a really interesting contrast there. And then I think string players having some awareness, this is, I'm finally answering your question, Tim. String players having an awareness of how it's different for a wind player in an orchestra, and wind players having awareness of just the physical demands on the violin. I mean, all the notes they have to learn. My God, you know, I mean, they have to, you know, having an empathy and a sympathy and an awareness and a sensitivity to what the other people in the group are having to do, the fact that their tasks are different. And I use the analogy from time to time of a body. Your kidneys are not less important than your heart. Your lungs are not less important than your digestive system. You need all of them, and you need all of them to work, but they don't do the same thing. So maybe in an orchestra, the section strings are like your skin. You know, it's not really the sexiest organ. It's not like, you know, it's not like the heart or the brain, you know, principal trumpet, principal oboe, like, you know, the big stars. But if you didn't have your skin, you'd be in trouble. It is just as important to your survival and your thriving as a human. And there are times when touching skin, remember what that was like? Touching someone else's skin. There are times when that organ becomes incredibly important and incredibly expressive and impressive. I'm stretching the analogy a little bit here, but you know, it's understanding the different roles of the different parts of the body being your ensemble, I think is a really important step to being successful in how you have to bend and change to meet them and to help them and to collaborate with them successfully. Does
Yeah,
that
I
kind
mean,
of
having empathy for another human being and what they're going through, you know, that is always going to be a way to be able to communicate with that person. I think in some ways, playing in band and playing in orchestra, you're constantly negotiating what is that bassist going through? What is that percussionist going through? When they see the conductor's bit and they hit, it's instant. And then, or what is that French horn player doing with the 32 feet of valving when they take a breath and plays the first note? You know, what does it mean to draw the bow and get the sound? So I think being empathetic to the different contact points, right?
And the conductor as leader is also a really powerful analogy, because the conductor makes no sound. I mean, ideally, unless we fall off the podium or hit something accidentally, the conductor makes no, and you could be a grunting, a Glenn Gould conductor, but the conductor makes no sound. The conductor is the leader, right? The conductor is the one, the basketball team, it's the coach who gets to hold the trophy. The conductor gets paid more, but the conductor actually doesn't cause anything to happen. And for the conductor to understand that is important. But then for the ensemble to understand that is equally important. We have different roles, and the best conductors are not the ones who act like they're in charge. The best conductors are the ones who inspire and elicit and encourage and facilitate the players to be more successful. And that's just like a manager or a president or a CEO or a team leader. You know, we can't do it alone. I'm reminded, there's a very famous thing that Gisele Bündchen said after a Super Bowl where the Patriots lost. And she was caught on an old cell phone camera walking through the basement after the Patriots had lost. And, you know, Tom Brady is her husband. And the quote was, it had some colorful language in it. She said, "My husband cannot both throw and catch the bleeping ball." Saying, you know, he could throw it, but someone's got to be there to receive it. Like, a lot of his passes were dropped in this game, basically. We can't throw and catch the ball as conductors, and we certainly can't run at 100 yards. We've got to have other people to hand off to and to catch the passes. I'm all about the sports.
I just found it really interesting because you're talking about, marathon runs for brass players, saying I'm actually one of my classes, I'm going to be writing about the ring cycle for my final paper. And I'm thinking about, the Wagnerian brass section, they're playing like massive stretches at a time, and how, you have the supporting principles just to help them get through the opera intact. And then, meanwhile, like, yeah, you're talking about Beethoven symphony, you're playing 1 in 5, every, few minutes.
Well, and then think about what the violins are doing in
the whole time.
I mean, it's, I have a poster right over here. I saw the Ring in Chicago. It's a long song, I mean, that's it's, and I think it is a great achievement of humanity, by a really, really problematic human being. But boy, that's a marathon for the audience, much less for the players.
All right, I think we have maybe time for one more question from the students. Liam, I know you have a question.
I don't know. I can't think of any now. I can't think of any other information.
Dylan or Nora or Sophie, Irene?
I've been so comprehensive in everything I've said. Need for additional knowledge. Everybody can just collect their degrees and go.
Okay, Gillis, you have a question.
That's right. No, there are some organizations that have vestigial humans. Sorry, was there?
Gillis writes, the only question I have is, what about the appendix?
Yeah, every analogy breaks down at some point, but honest to God, I'm sure every orchestra has an appendix too that could be, there's someone in a chair somewhere that could be excised. Here, look at this robust analogy. There's some people, there's that one person in the orchestra who could be excised and it would not affect the group at all. And there's also that person in the orchestra who becomes inflamed and is an appendicitis in the ensemble and starts to threaten the survival of the entire organization by the way that they interact with other parts of the body, that in essence starts to poison the rest of the body, and you want to get in there and cut that out, so that the whole thing doesn't die. How about that for stretching an analogy far beyond? If someone can get a vaccine into this analogy, we could, that's your practicing.
So just don't be an appendix. Basically.
Don't be an appendix.
Well, we've come to the end of the hour, and Dr. Cross, we've really enjoyed your analogies and your insights. So thank you so much for spending time with us. Everybody, let's put the videos on and we'll take a group photo. And that's my sneaky way of taking attendance as well. But let's say I'll take 3 photos. All right, so have your videos on. Here we go. All right, ready? 1, 2, 3. All right.
There you go.
So Dr. Cross has generously said he will stay maybe another 5-10 minutes if anybody have dying question you were too shy to ask before. But thank you for joining us, everybody. We're done for the day.
Great to see you all.